What time is it? It is Blueclock Podtalk on Mondays at 7 p.m. Super excited to announce that we are going to launch Season 1, Episode 2 today, where we talk about business development, motivation, in our day-to-day lives. We are now live on YouTube and Facebook, so be sure to check out our channels on those social media sites. And before I announce our co-host for the evening, the guests that we have, comment down in the comment section below. Let us know what topic you like to hear when we do these podcasts or go live. Also, if you're a business leader or a business owner, a community leader, or a pastor, or a nonprofit organization, or anything like that, we'd love to have you on the show. Be sure to reach out to us at blueclock.podtalk@outlook.com. That's blueclock.podtalk@outlook.com. And before I announce it, man, I'm going to go ahead and kill this music. Super excited to have my co-host for the evening, Teresa Oechsli. I think I said that right.
You did.
With Hosea'S house out in Portland, Kentucky, in the Louisville area. And Teresa, how are you doing today?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's been a pretty crazy week already that we're walking into. But you know what? We're getting through it. So before we get started, I just want you to kind of share a little bit of our story, or your all story, with the Hosea'S house, how it got started, what your mission is, and just kind of walk us through that. By the way, Teresa with Hosea'S house, it's a nonprofit organization, and she's going to walk us through what that is. So Teresa, explain a little bit to us about what you guys do.
Yes. So actually it was a setup from God that I was in dentistry for 27 years. So I would go into the west end of Louisville, and we would do free dental clinics in the areas where people, that was a service that was needed. I was working at the church one day, and I ran into one of the ladies that was there. And just reading her information, I found out that she was staying at the Center for Women and Families from a domestic violence situation. But this woman was just beautiful. She just had such a beautiful spirit. And I don't know if you've ever met those people, but you want to be their friend because they just have this spirit about them. And she was one of them. Yeah. And growing up in a home of domestic violence, I think God just really was going to utilize what I had been through just to walk alongside of her. So God just told me to be her friend, and we started this friendship. And she was an African-American woman, and she taught me so much about faith. For someone that was in a shelter, I admired her faith. It was so strong in what Christ can do.
Yeah.
And even in her situation that looked dark, she had hope, and that inspired me. And her philosophy wasn't, what if God doesn't show up? It was, how would he not?
Right.
And so she just taught me so much about that. And we'd go feed the homeless, and I'd take her to Bible studies, and we just started this beautiful friendship. She would come to our house for dinner. And one night at the table, she was talking to my husband and I, and she said, we need to open a shelter. We need to open a home for women in crisis because we can give them hope.
Yeah.
We can teach them about Jesus. And that was one of the things that she was getting in trouble for at the shelter because she was evangelizing there. And she said, what good is it if we offer them a safe place, but we don't offer them hope?
Yeah.
And so she said, I see this beautiful home, and we'll love their children, and we'll teach them who God says they are. And at that moment, I think my husband saw it, but I was a little confused because I'm like, we have never done anything like that. And, the sad part of this whole story was that she was murdered a couple weeks later by her boyfriend. And it was my journey with God to think, because we had been friends for like 11 months before she was murdered.
Right.
And on November 5th of 2004, he murdered her in an elevator. And I really questioned God about what's this look like? Like, right. What were you thinking? Because now, she had this vision, but we had this plan, and now it's gone. And through my healing with that, and what God was showing me was that I was to carry the vision and bring it to pass. Yeah. And I didn't know what that looked like, but I just knew that I could trust God.
Isn't it so crazy, too, that, you're looking at someone and develop this relationship with someone that has a pretty bad background,
Yes.
but their faith that God has them taken care of through this whole process um, is kind of what I'm getting at. It inspired you to see her strength to just kind of persevere on, kind of just carry out that vision for a safe place because of these situations.
Right.
Yeah.
And I wanted her life to be the story and not her death.
Right.
That she, maybe a week or so before she was murdered, we were on our way to Shelbyville to her church service, and she and I were singing "It Is Well with My Soul." And I just thought when she died, I thought, the words of that song, I just know that she was crying out to the Lord,
Yeah.
and he was there with her, even in the presence of, her going into heaven. And so she just, she changed my life, and I committed that I would do my part
Yeah.
to bring this vision to pass. And I totally did not know where to start, but God did.
Yeah.
And so when I did start this, the Lord gave me 3 instructions. And the first one was that I could not ask for money. The second one was that I had to keep my eyes on him. And the third was that he would send his people. Yeah. And that was what he gave me and sent me out. And I'm like, I don't understand what this looks like. But, it's amazing how God puts people in your path when you walk the faith with him.
Right.
And so I told the Lord, I said, I will do this. And he brought people into my path from church that, I had a lady that wrote my 501c3 for me,
Yeah.
paid for it. And then when I got it, she said, this is it. This is as far as I'm going. You carry it from here. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute.
Hey, here you go. Here's
Right.
what you need, but good luck.
Yes. And that's what she did. She said, God gave you this vision, not me. And so it just along the way, God's just started putting people in my path that, I saw a house. I knew that God was going to give me a house. I didn't
Right.
realize it was going to take 5 years to get the house.
Right.
But during those 5 years, the Lord required me to walk alongside of the Center for Women and Families, and I would help women that, they couldn't assist, and I would help them, and I would do whatever I had to do to get those people in safe places. And so my daughter used to joke with me, and she, so the name Hosea'S House, God gave me that name.
Right.
Because in domestic violence, a woman goes back 8 times before she breaks free or gets killed.
Wow.
Now, that was the statistics when Jeanette died. It's probably, less than that now.
Right. Right.
But God spoke to me, and he said, I'm Hosea. I'll redeem them over and over if that's what it takes. And so that's where the name Hosea'S House comes from, because God will redeem them even if they go back.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So my question is now that you gave us the beginnings of Hosea'S House, so why it's got started, what is your all's mission today? What do you all have a mission statement that you guys kind of go by that you're like, hey, this is us, this is our vision, this is what we are going after? And obviously you kind of shared that vision a little
Right.
bit as we're walking into that, but what do you think your main mission statement is for Hosea'S House? What does that look like for you guys?
We serve women and children in crisis through housing, advocacy, life skill training, Bible study, and prayer through the love of Christ. And because we know that Christ is the only one that can heal our brokenness.
Right.
And when we take him out of that picture, we're not completely whole.
Yeah.
And when I'm meeting with the ladies and I'm talking to them and they're wanting to come into the program, I tell them, like, you're not here because you are a drug addict.
Right.
You're here because there's an issue of your heart that has never been healed.
Yeah.
And if you will just allow God to heal that, everything else will take care of itself.
Oh, absolutely. I'd have to say that. Couldn't agree more with that.
Right.
And so my question for you guys is, what is some of the things that you all see that comes into your all's facility or into your all's care? I know not any, without releasing any kind of personal information or anything like that, but I'm a little curious of things that we might see, or even to give the listening audience that's here right now that hey, this is signs that if you see this person may need some help, or this is what we kind of take care of, or we bring into our care to help whatever issues that they may see to the day-to-day. Like, obviously, yourself, you can't see those things or issues until they get brought to you guys at
Right.
Hosea'S house. So what's something as us, as daily people, as daily Americans, or just daily people in general, that even may be overseas or in different countries that you're like, something doesn't seem right. This person needs some help. What's
Right.
that look like?
Well, I say go with your gut feeling because that is a leading of the Holy Spirit. I grew up in a home of domestic violence. We were the church people. We had the White House on the corner, but we were very broken, and no one knew it because we wore a great mask. My mother taught us well,
Yeah.
how to cover that. But there are always signs, and it's not even just domestic violence. It can be, human trafficking. I mean, 97% of the women that we serve have suffered abuse, addiction, and or human trafficking. But 95% of them were sexually abused as children. That is staggering to me because I'm thinking, I always say if we can heal the mother, we can heal the children.
Right.
Because if we can educate the mothers, on what, what they're worthy of,
Right.
then, and I always tell them, your children, feed on your emotions. If you're happy, they're happy.
Yeah.
If you are healed, they will be healed. And so that's, my goal is to get the mothers into a mindset where they accept a good life and know what red flags are, for the people that they're choosing in their life, because some of the children are abused through people that they bring into their home.
And that's the thing that I wanted to talk to you about is what is some of those red flags? What do you consider a red flag maybe in a home? Something that says, hey, look, this ain't right. Either you may encounter that person, or maybe you just see them for a brief moment when you walk into their home, or you're starting to build a personal relationship with this person.
Right.
What's that red flag? What's it look like? What can we see? What's something that we may say, oh, wait a minute, they need some help?
Mm-hmm. Control, isolation, pulling away from their family, being pulled away from their family. That's one of the top first, clues. Is also one thing that I've really learned is if a person is really wowing you in the beginning and really going above and beyond, that's a red flag.
Yeah.
Because it's it's too much too soon. Also, violence or hurtful words. If you see someone and they have a mark on them,
Yeah.
you kind of have to investigate that.
Oh, absolutely.
But a lot of times the abuse isn't physical, it's so mental, and they're broken down to feel like they don't have worth. And so, seeing someone that's pulled back or you can see signs, or if the children are disruptive or, struggle even in school.
So I wanted to talk to you about something. You mentioned something. You said even the mental thing, and I'm going to go even really into the real world. And when I do this, and I know that there's a lot of it. So before I walk into this, hang on a minute.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to get too far ahead of myself if I'm not careful. Statistically, based off what you see, and I'm going to ask you an example of something here in a minute, but statistically of what you see, the people that are getting this abuse, mental abuse, physical abuse, whatever it may be,
Yes.
is it typically the closest people they're with at homes? Is that what that is? Like your family and friends and things like that?
Yes. Very seldom a stranger. And it's people that you bring into the home. The thing is, especially with single moms and something that I have struggled with, and I get it because I do see the back part of it, but, if a single mom's out there on her own and she's barely making it, barely able to pay her bills, and she can't find childcare. See, this is what happens. So these men prey on women like that.
Yeah.
I know it goes both ways, okay, but this is what I'm seeing.
Right.
So they prey on these women because they know that they're in these situations that are vulnerable.
Yeah.
And so then what happens is he's not working. He's living on her, providing and food stamps and benefits. And then guess who he becomes? The babysitter
Oh, yeah.
for the children. It's convenient. And that's why we hear these stories of these children being abused.
Do you think they get comfortable? And is this the reason why they may continue to deal with the abuse and the violence and whatever mental capabilities that they're doing to them, because they have no one else to call on, and
Right.
so they're like, hey, this is all I know, and so I'm just going to live with it. Is that
They
do
feel
you all run
trapped.
into that?
Absolutely. They feel like they don't have anywhere to go, and most of them don't. I mean, the shelters are so full. I get calls all the time. And there's just so little help. There really is.
Yeah,
If you have two or three children, where are you going to take these children? I mean, you can only live with a relative for so long before they kick you out, right?
right.
So that's why it's just so important that we talk about this, because I feel like if we can open more places, especially that are Christ centered,
Yeah,
um, we are seeing God break generational curses over families.
yeah,
And in miracle ways that it would not have been possible had someone not walked alongside of that mother and loved her enough to speak hard truth
yeah,
and show her a different life. And that's the goal of Hosea'S house. We serve women and children in crisis, so we're not just domestic violence.
right.
And that's the beauty of the ministry, and I think what God gave me was that we can receive any woman in crisis, whether she be 50 to 65. We've had them, and because they receive little to no support as well, you know. We take pregnant women, we take single women. So that's the beauty of that, is that we can take. We're not just limited to domestic violence, although
Yeah.
we do get that.
So, as we're still here talking a little bit based on the statistics and things like this, I said I wanted to ask you a question and for an example. And one of the things that I want to walk into, and I'm going to use my industry for an example. The reason is because that's what I know a little bit more about, and I've seen it firsthand. Is it very possible? Well, there's going to be a couple examples and questions that I'm going to ask in this while I got you here. Is it possible, one, to see this abuse by a boss or by a place in your workplace that's mentally abusing you, or some type of way of a work kind of abuse type thing? That's one thing that I'm going to ask you about. And then two, for an example in my industry is even statistically in the automotive industry, I've worked for individuals, and I'm going to keep those confidential just because, but I've worked for other individuals too, to where if it's a woman or elderly person or someone that may be a single mother with kids or something like that, they kind of use that to their advantage in a sense. And this is one reason why I've went on my own, because I think all people need to be treated equally. I think you need to treat those individuals the way they need to be treated, like how you want to be treated, right?
Right.
And so I've seen it. And so is that something that you guys may see a lot of in day-to-day lives, the workforce kind of environment in what's going on today?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, especially in the workplace, because if you have a single mom, like let's say the women that we serve, I have a mom that's struggling with that now. She has two children. One's in school, one's in daycare. She didn't have a car, but thank God someone donated the money for her to buy a car. But she has this job, but then she's got to get the children. She's got to get the one child to school. She's got to get the one to daycare. She's got to get to work on time, and then she's got to get off in time to go pick up because she doesn't have anyone else.
Right.
She has no one. She has no family. So they're vulnerable. And what do they do? What do they do? So her work is frustrated with her because she can't stay late, and she can't work Saturdays because she doesn't have childcare.
Right.
So, it's one of those things that, and this is for the reason why I think a lot of men come into the situation at that point, because they are so desperate for help,
Yeah.
and for someone to be there to help them, that they'll take anyone.
Yeah.
And usually their choices in men to this point have not been healthy, haven't been well.
Well, and then not only that, but you have all the hurt and things that have been going on with this woman and her kids, or maybe generational curses like you have talked about.
Yes.
And then they bring this other broken person into the relationship that may even have those, or even, I don't want to say worse, I wouldn't want to put a tier on things, but similar generational curses that need to be broken on their life and healing. Is that something that, to me, is what I'm hearing is now you don't only have one broken person, now you have two broken people, and the abuse and the violence and all
And
of the
the
crazy
children.
stuff. The children on top of it.
I was the child that, used to hide under the bed, and so, that's where it's like, if we can save one family, if we can turn around one family, one mom, it's worth it to me, because I was that child and I know what that life is like.
Yeah.
And, to be free of that, my mother at that time didn't have the resources that are out there today. But I just think, wow, what if something were available at that time?
Yeah, and so what I want to ask you is, before we went live on camera, is you mentioned to me, I want to get this out there because I know there's a lot more people that may have the same vision, the same heart. You just mentioned resources, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is resources very limited versus demand of issues that is happening on a day-to-day aspect? How much more help is needed for this type of stuff?
I don't think we'll ever be able to meet the full need.
Right.
It's like Jesus said, you'll always have the poor with you,
Yeah.
right? But I do believe that there are people out there that want to do something but don't know where to start, okay? Right. Like me, I was terrified, but at the same time, when God told me to do this, and he told me that I couldn't ask for money, so this was in 2004 I started this journey. Well, in 2009, okay, so you know what happened in 2008? Our economy crashed,
yeah.
right? So in 2009, God says, okay, now's a great time. Let's launch this thing, okay? And now, mind you, I had no support. I didn't have any,
Yeah.
And so I go looking for houses. Now, I didn't have any money, but I knew a big God. And I knew if God told me this, and this is where I put it all on him. And I told him, I will do this, but the day that I can't pay one bill, I will close it.
Yeah.
Because I'll know your hand's been removed from it. And I was looking around, and I had a different vision. I was going to go toward the East End, and I thought I had a big plan. But God sent me to Portland, right off the 22nd Street exit in Portland, in the West End. And people ask me, why Portland? And I'm like, you just have to take that up with him, because that's where he sent me. And we found, so I was looking into a home or a building there, and I found out it was owned by the pastor of Shawnee Baptist Church.
Uh-huh.
So I thought, well, I'm just going to go over there and talk to them, tell them what we're doing. And, so I go over there and introduce myself. And I said, we've been here in the community. We're loving the, women and children in this community, and we want that building. And so he's like, okay. And so long story short, that building got bought out from under us. And I was devastated, because I'd been doing this for 5 years without a house. I mean, my daughter at one point said, Mom, don't call it Hosea'S house. You don't have a house. Just call it Hosea. You're like, And that's how it felt. I was, I'd see people, and I was like, oh, I don't even want to see them, because, they're going to ask me about a house, and I don't have a house. Yeah. So a couple weeks later, I was driving through the neighborhood, and I saw this house, and it was for sale by owner. So I called the owner. And the next day, I met the owner, who just so happened to be the pastor of Shawnee Baptist Church. And when he walked up, I was like, God said, this is what I had for you. Yeah. He already knows what you're doing. And so, so I wanted the house. It was totally remodeled on the corner lot. It was perfect, big. And I said, but I don't have any money. And it was $63,000. Which isn't a lot, but when you have $0, 63 is a lot.
And is
this
2009?
Yep,
So
2009.
We're right out of almost the Great Depression era again.
Right. And here we go. And I have no money. So anyway, I told the pastor, I said, look, if you will give me 90 days, I think I can get the money. And I said, you know what we're doing here in the community. He's like, well, let me pray about it. So he leaves, and the pastor that was with me at the time said, you should have told him 120 days. We're going to need some time. And I said, God will work it out.
Yeah.
So a week later, he came to me and he said, God told me that this was Hosea'S house. And we want you to have the house. You can have immediate possession. You can have 120 days to pay the note. He did not hear that conversation. And my wife and I will contribute $2,000 on the closing. So that's where I started. And so I fundraised, prayed, fasted. So we raised $20,000.
Right.
So on the day of closing, I call him. And I said, I know that's our house, but God has not allowed me to get all the money. And he said, well, God's already told me that you weren't going to get all the money, and I'll finance you.
Wow.
So it was kind of a for sale by owner deal.
Yeah.
Faith is a really bad business plan. And, you can't really walk into the bank and go, God told me that he would do that. Like, he would pay for it. And so that's how I did it.
You mean they won't jump all over that?
No,
Teresa?
they don't. And my mortgage was $642 a month.
Yeah.
And I had zero support, but I was getting women in there. I didn't know what, and I hired a house administrator with a salary, and I didn't have any money because I gave him all my money. And I can remember just sitting there at that table offering her a salary, and I'm sitting there thinking in my mind, I have $0, but, and so I left there, and I got in the car, and I said, God, we're in this now.
Yeah.
And if it fails, they'll say you failed. And this is your name. This isn't about me. This is about what you called me to do. This is your house.
Yeah.
And I'm trusting you. And so I go to the post office box, and in that was 2 envelopes. And I just laid my hands on them, and I said, God, you know our need. And there was a check for $10,000.
Isn't that amazing?
And, November 5th of 2024, it'll be 20 years that I started this. And I can say in 20 years, we never missed one payment.
Yeah.
We had that house paid off in 4 years. We had another house donated to us. We did 2 major, over $250,000 remodels on both those houses with no budget, and they were paid for because God's people showed up.
It's amazing. And so I want to talk about it a little bit too, is sometimes when you feel like you're called to do something, or you have this vision that God gives you, about 90%, I would say probably 98.9 or 99.9% is never on your timing, is it?
No. God's ways are not our ways, or his time. He's much bigger. And I looking back, I know those 5 years was my training, my grounding, because I had to be on my knees. I had to stay on my knees. Even after I received the house, you think, oh, yeah, you got the house now. Great, good. But, the struggle is there. The struggle is real. And there were times that, I'm not kidding you, one time we got down to $10 in our bank account. Now, it was about $2,800 to run the house.
Yeah.
And that night, one of my donors had invited me to go to another fundraiser. And I'm on my way there, and I'm like, God, you have such a sense of humor, because here I am going with one of my donors to another fundraiser, whom I know they're doing well. I mean, I go in there, and there's like probably close to 500 people there. And I'm like, really, God? Like, really? This, and I know you're going to financially require me to give to them tonight. And that I was talking to a friend of mine, and she's like, hey, she invited her friend over, and she goes, hey, do you know Teresa from Hosea'S house? And she's like, yeah, I know her. And I'm sitting there looking at the lady. Now, I know faces. I will not forget a face. And I said, ma'am, I said, I'm sorry. I said, but I don't think I know you. And she goes, I know you. And I have something for you. And inside her purse, she handed me an envelope that said Hosea'S house.
Wow.
And it was a check for $7,000. That's the faithfulness of God. And that's what I want to encourage people. Like, I did not have an ability to bring this to pass.
Yeah.
I didn't even, I didn't have the mental capacity, I didn't have the financial capacity, but I knew that my God did.
Yeah.
And I trusted him. And that when God calls us to something, somehow we think we have to add our part to it, and that's a lie.
Yeah.
That's straight out of hell. Because what God showed me was, try me and see if I don't, God provides for his work, his provisions.
Right.
And so it might come at the midnight hour, but he was always faithful, and we never missed a payment.
So my thing is I was talking to somebody. We went to church with. They no longer go there because they had to move and they had some life things that happened. And I'll never forget when his wife came to me and said, Travis, he's already equipped the unequipped, so you already have everything that you need. This was in the middle of me planning the shop and the vision that he gave us to do that. And I've been there. I understand the whole not having any kind of money. There was last year we did X amount for what we grossed at the shop, and in the middle of the winter time, I was like, "There's no way we're going to be able to make payroll. I don't know how we're going to do this." And I haven't shared this with many people. Now we're sharing it all over social media. But anyway, there was at one point in time, it was around December, January. I mean, I sat down with Tara and I said, I don't know what we're going to do. We're probably going to have to close the doors. And man, I think it was and what it was is I got in the way.
Right.
We got into this place to where we were doing decently at the shop. We were bringing in a good income. And it was one of those things where I let me get involved of, hey, look at what we are doing. Babe. Look at what the guys are doing at the shop. And then, dude, he broke me down on the way to the shop. I was taking Waylon to daycare in E-Town, and I'm nervous. I'm freaking out. I don't know. It's around Christmas time. Is my kids even going to have Christmas? We don't have the income coming in. I've got 3 employees. How are we going to pay their salaries? Like, what are we going to do at the time? And I'll never forget it. Right before I got to the Litchfield exit, I rode up to the shop, and he said, "Don't forget." And and what happened that next 2 weeks, I couldn't even express it. We went from, I think it was like $150 in our account to like $15,000 of work that came through our doors.
Right.
And I'll never forget having that conversation where he's like, and I told him, I said, it's yours. So you tell me what you want to do, because I keep screwing it up, or I think we did this. And it wasn't. It was the reason why we planted that shop was two visions, and it was, one, be a change in the community, and 2, provide a new start for employees. He never promised me that we were going to be millionaires. He never promised me that it was all going to be ours, And it's like, how are you going to be a change in the community and provide a new start for employees if you got this I and me mindset? It's not. It's God's, And so to have this platform to share it is wonderful. So my biggest thing, too, I wanted to ask you is the resources. If you're looking to start a nonprofit, I don't know anything about the nonprofit world or any kind of organization or anything like that. Now, of course, it has a lot to do with business too, to get things started. And
absolutely.
I know a lot about the business world. Don't know anything about nonprofit organizations. So, if someone wanted to go out and start this on their own, if they feel like they have some kind of calling on their life to start some kind of nonprofit, it may not have to do with domestic violence or anything like that. It could be something else to help out in their community, the world, whatever it may be. What's some of the first steps that they need to start from, or that they may need to know before they even get started, that they might run into or will run into to get this thing off the ground or whatever they're trying to do? Yeah.
Well, first of all, I think you have to have a covering of a church and your pastor. I think that's tremendously important, because I'm talking from a spiritual aspect of a nonprofit. And so how God called me to do things, some people, it has to be a calling on your life. It has to be God-led in order to do it the way that I have. But once you have that, then to have, a support group around you, because you're going to need it, first of all. So that's the first place to start. and having accountability and partnership with people that are going to speak truth into your life and grow you. But, I always ask people when they come in and they are really wanting to start this ministry and do it. But the first thing is you have to get your 501c3, your nonprofit status through the IRS, and you have to get incorporated. Those are the two things that will help launch you, because it's hard to get people to donate when you don't have your, nonprofit status. So in that, there are many people that can help write that for you or do that for you. And it's about $600 to $1,000 investment.
Okay.
But once you get that, then, you can start, getting donations in and everything. So that was the first place that I started, was to get that.
Do you start that? You just go through a CPA. They help you with that. Someone that's reputable to help get that started. Whatever your local tax person is, or who you trust as far as maybe who does your personal taxes or something like that. Is
And
that
anyone can do it. I mean, it's just, it's a lot of paperwork, and you got to have some information, So there are nonprofit organizations that will help with that. We have one in Portland that helps, some of them get started and writing that. So it doesn't take a long time, but it's just a process that you have to go through to get that. So that's one of the main things I suggest doing first, and getting your name incorporated so that no one else takes your name, and things like that. Right. And having the vision. People, come to me and are like, "Oh, you should teach other people how to do this," and and I'm like, I can't teach that, because it's a gift. It's something that God gave me,
right.
And how I do things. Like, some people, when I first started this, even Christians and churches, some churches, you didn't count the cost.
Yeah.
And you're right, I didn't. Because that's not how God called me to do it.
Yeah.
And now, I'm not saying he calls everyone to do it that way, but, I didn't have a business plan. Honestly, 20 years later, I still don't have a business plan. We had a budget that we never looked at because we never got to that level. It was just, so I'll go back to the story you were talking about when you put yourself in it, okay?
Yeah.
So January of 2020, the house that I originally bought in 2009, so I opened that first house on the 5-year anniversary of my friend's death. November 5th of 2009, I opened it. That was strategic from God. And then, so 10 years later, or actually longer than that, we were in the house for longer than that. It was in 2020. We decided that we needed to totally redo this house. It's over 100 years old. And the foundation was falling. I mean, it needed to be redone. Now, we already had our other home, our residential home, so we moved everyone over there. And we said, okay, this is the time. We're going to gut this whole thing out. We're going to take everything out, and we're going to put everything new, and it's going to be beautiful. Okay? And we made it a duplex, so it's 2 houses for our graduates.
Yeah.
So I go, and I'm meeting with a guy talking to me about what we're going to do. And he gave me the price, and it was like $270,000. Now, we're in Portland, first of all, and, we're investing this kind of money. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're not going to get that return back, okay?
Tell people what Portland's like, if anybody doesn't know.
Well, Portland, it's in the West End, and it is, a poor area of the West End. Not everyone there is poor, and the housing has changed. Let's say that it is getting better, for sure there, and people are coming in trying to pour into Portland. But it gets a really bad name because there is some violence there, there is some gangs, there is drugs. But I have been there since 2007, and I've never had an issue there as far as feeling threatened or anything like that.
Do you feel like that's why so many people ask you why Portland?
Yeah.
Because they have a bad reputation for things like that?
But
what better area to do that when you're trying to help people from that type of area, right?
And when God called me there in 2007, I didn't see the big picture, but a lot of ministry has been poured into Portland lately in the last 5 years to 10 years. So I was already there. I was already established in Portland. So I think, that was another plan from God. But when I got that bill or that quote, I go out to my car and I just said, there's no way. And immediately, the Holy Spirit convicted me. And I started crying. And the Lord said to me, are you trying to own this? And immediately I repented.
Yeah.
Because I was so convicted. Because I'm like, Lord, this is your home. And this is your house. And these are your people that you're sending to help us. And so, my board, I have a strong board. That's another thing. Like if you're going to start your 501c3, you need strong people in your life. And not just your family and your friends. We all start out like that. Oh, my brother can, be strategic in asking God for, like an attorney. And, we have an insurance person. People that can, meet a need,
Right.
For the ministry. And that love the Lord, of course. But so, they trusted that the Lord was leading us, and we proceeded with the aspect that we would move when God moved. So when God provided, and he provided for the foundation, we had the foundation done.
Yeah.
And that's how we did it. It took 2.5 years. But
To fully renovate.
yeah.
Wow.
Okay, so this was in January 2020. So
Yeah.
they ripped out everything. And when I say everything, when they tore the siding off this building, every piece of wood had to be replaced. So one day I'm looking at the house, and I can see my neighbor's house through the house.
Yeah.
Like, it's that bad. And then, what happens in March of 2020?
Oh, yeah.
A pandemic. And our house is completely ripped out. So there is no going back and going, oh, no, we're not going to do this now. And I'm sitting there thinking, really, God?
It's either we're stuck
We're
or
in a
we got to go forward.
pandemic. You knew this was going to happen. And how in the world? People were scared and terrified and losing their jobs and not working. And we're supposed to ask people for money,
Right.
or to give. But you know what? The crazy thing was, and where God showed up in 2020, when we were going through COVID, and even in the worst part of, the first part of 2020 and COVID, none of our women lost their jobs. Every one of them worked during the pandemic.
Great.
And we were blessed so much that we were building onto our other house. We didn't miss anything.
Yeah.
We were like overly blessed during this time. So I'm like, okay, God, because when there's a crisis, you will find the helpers. God's people will show up in a crisis. Absolutely. In a crisis, Mr. Rogers said, his mom said, in the middle of the crisis, just find your helpers. They're there.
Yeah.
And God sent help, and God sent, and I think that the reason why God called me to do the ministry this way is because it shows the women that God can be trusted.
Yeah.
Even when it looks impossible, because they're amazed. One day, we took them to Walmart, and we were buying all the ladies' coats and gloves, and the kids were excited, and everyone was excited. We went to dinner, and so they get in the van, and they're like, Miss Teresa, thank you for, doing this for us.
Yeah.
And I said, well, first of all, it is not me. The reason why we're able to do this is because somebody donated.
Right.
And one of the ladies, I will never forget, she goes, you mean strangers love us? And I'm like, yeah, strangers love you.
Yeah.
And it's just, we have seen miracles. I mean, we had one lady, she was a recovering addict, had been in the sex industry, lost a child to her addiction, and came to me pregnant, a mess.
Wow.
Mother, heroin addict, 3 blocks down from us. And in her brokenness, God met her. And she had her baby while she was at Hosea'S house, came back to Hosea'S house, and she came to me one day and she said, I want to go to college. She said, everyone's told me that I'm stupid, but I'm not stupid. And I want to go to college. I want to go to Sullivan University. I said, okay, let's go over there, and she wanted to go into interior design. I said, let's go. And so we go in there, and she said, she came back out, and she goes, well, it's a little expensive. And I said, what? She goes, it's going to be about $85,000.
Wow.
And I was like, are you, what? Like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm just, what? Do you know how long it's going to take you to make that? And she said to me, if God wants me here, he'll make a way.
Yeah.
And she said, Miss Teresa, when I don't have my faith, I borrow yours. And I mean, maybe a month later, one of my donors called me and said, I was driving to the farm today, and God told me I was supposed to pay that girl's tuition.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, okay. And I hung up, and I called him back. I'm like, no, wait a minute. Do you understand, like, this is $85,000? And he goes, yeah.
Yeah.
He said, it's the only way she's going to break free and change the curses of her family.
Yeah.
And, you know, she graduated with a bachelor's degree in interior design.
Amazing.
She bought a home in Portland. She paid for it and has 2 boys now and is loving the community. And, you know, and on Thanksgiving, she goes out and feeds the homeless. And their goal is to feed 100 people this year for Thanksgiving. And that's success for Hosea'S house. That she said, my son here will never know what it's like to have an addicted mother.
Yeah.
And she never went back.
Yeah. So, and I want to do this too because it's something that I resonate with a little bit as well. Is sometimes do you think God allows us to have those struggles at whatever vision He gave us, right? With you guys, it's Hosea'S house. With ours, it's the shop. And I think those struggles is just a reminder to say, hey, it's me, not you.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to have these struggles to keep your faith a little bit. What's your thoughts on that a little bit?
Absolutely. Yeah. We can be full of ourselves. We can be, if I try to own this, if I try to say, oh, and people are like, you are so good, like you, I'm like, oh, Lord have mercy. No, because I know I'm not that good. God makes me look good.
Yeah.
But, you know, I am just an everyday person. And trust me, when I write grants or anything like that, I am like totally dependent on the Lord. You know, administration, you know, visionaries, administration usually is a struggle for them, okay? Right. I know it is for me. Like, I can run with the you give me a half of a vision and I'll run with it, right?
Right.
But it's all that backside stuff that you have to do, the accountability, you know, the finding, you know, all that. And, you know, but God, in His faithfulness, uses the broken to show other people that He can use you too.
Yeah, and I think testimony or sharing your story, for instance, of how you get started or where you came from and what your story is, even in your childhood and things like that, I don't think it's anything to be ashamed of. It lets other people know that, hey, you know what, we're human. Mm-hmm. And if you rely on faith in God, that anything's possible. And so it's pretty crazy to see. What I love about it, of what you were telling me, is basically she came to you all to Hosea'S house and said, hey, this is what I want to do. This is where I'm going to be. But right. Now that she has went through all of this, you guys have provided a place for God to help her. That's right. The best way to put that. Now she knows. You can't tell her any different that it was God that made this happen. Mm-hmm. And now her faith is built off of you guys providing a safe place for her. And then now she's out doing the same things.
She's modeling it. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the thing, when that donor gave her that money, she said, you know, my own family don't even think I'm worth that. And yet a stranger, whom I don't even know, thought my son and I were worth that. And she said that meant more to me than anything, because I have never felt worthy. I have never felt like, you know, I am worth that. But I know, and she, you know, it was a struggle when, you know, getting her through 4 years. And, but the goal, you know, I think too, is to plant them in the community. I mean, we have a community outreach too. So it's not just, hey, look at Hosea'S house over here, but planting others in that neighborhood so that she can be a light in an area that I can't reach there in the neighborhood, but she's out there doing it. And I have another lady that's, you know, living in Portland now. And so hopefully we can, and we'll we be, to be good neighbors, to take care of our yards, to model what it looks like to surrender a life to Him.
Yeah.
And so that's what, we want to be good neighbors to the people that we serve, in keeping our yard and making sure so that we stand out to be different. I mean, one day we had this lady that showed up on our porch. She was asleep in the rocking chair, and she had on her pajamas, and her hair was cut, and she had a little bag of clothes, like a little Kroger bag. And she was asleep on our porch. And so my house administrator goes out there, and she's hungry. And she had escaped one of the drug houses there.
Wow.
And they had cut her hair. And she said, I knew that I could come here. I knew this was a safe place. And, just being a light in a dark place. People feel the peace, and they know. We don't have a sign. We've never had a sign.
Yeah.
But people know where the safe spaces are, where Christ shines. And she was drawn there. And we were able to get her the help that she needed. So,
yeah. I think, too, we trying to remember what the message was exactly for this Sunday. Did you all make it to church this Sunday? I didn't know if
we
you did.
didn't.
So it's kind of funny that we're talking about this because he mentioned something. He says sharing your testimony and where you've been and where you come from. Once you get the healing that you need and you kind of just give it all to God and you're healed and you're whole and you're healthy and now you're able to share your testimony, I think it allows your story is your story, right?
Right.
And so when you allow God to intervene in that, you're able to speak to other people that can relate to your testimony. And so I think it's so good to why it's very important to share. Don't feel like that you're too nervous to let that out or to tell people. I think you can find that there's a lot more people that can relate to you, and there's so many because for my story of mine and Tara's, we're going to be able to speak to people in a different way than what someone that hasn't been through that. It's no different than you guys with the domestic violence and the abuse and whoever that walks through your all's place that may be going through something, that's their story. And now they are even able to relate to other people to say, hey, you know what? It's okay. I've been here. Let me show you how to get help.
Right.
Yeah, so
I was a church lady for so many years, because we grew up holding our secrets, right? And I can remember I was teaching children's church and women's ministry and just so broken because, I held all that. And, when I started going through my healing and I started exposing, in Celebrate Recovery, they say you're only as sick as your secrets.
yeah,
And when I started exposing that, the enemy no longer had a hold on me. And that was, I found freedom in that. Like, this is my story. It's ugly, but it's my story, and God redeemed it.
And what's so cool about it is what I think is it no longer traps your mind in prison. When you're able to share your story or share it with someone that you feel like you can trust and that's going to help you in the right direction,
Right.
It then starts to free. It breaks the chains. It breaks the imprisonment out of your mind or whatever type of mental capacity it puts you in. And now it's almost like a weight lifted off that individual's chest. So I think testimony and telling your story is wonderful. I think it just, once you are healed, whole, and healthy, it's just a reminder to say, you know what, this is where we come from and how good God really is, because if we don't have that constant reminder or we're not able to share that, sometimes it's easy just to fall back into the mess a little bit too, So, or you may be afraid to even share it, or you get trapped again, So it's always good to let someone in that you can trust, a close individual, or even just sharing someone that may went through a recent experience similar to yours in the past. So some other resources. You talked about 501c. That was one of the main things that you needed to get a nonprofit organization started. And you kind of walked through a little bit of what that looks like, to how to get it started. What's the next step? I know as you get further down the road, there's going to be other things that arise, right? And so if that was the kind of the very first step, hey, this is one, have the vision, right?
Right.
Have the vision, carry out the vision, and when you know that God's called you to do that, or you feel deeply in your heart that it's time to start this, it's 501c. What comes next after that?
Well, I think you have to start, well, you have to create your board as well. So you'll
Yeah.
have to have that in place, and you'll have to have, good solid people on your board, a functioning board, even reading some books about how to develop your board. I have trusted the Lord in that, and I've never asked someone to, I always allow God to speak to them to come, because I want that like-minded spirit. But, to have a good solid board, but also to start building relationships with organizations and churches and people that can help support your ministry.
Yeah.
And not just, because I couldn't ask for money. I couldn't ask, hey, Travis, would you give us, $20,000?
Right.
People do that. I'm not. This is just what God told me. Okay. So, but I could come to you and say, Travis, here are 4 needs of our ministry. We need $5,000 for, to finish our landscaping and
Right.
to dig, or we need a new driveway. This is what this would cost. Would you pray and ask God, if there's a way that, any way that you would want to support us in any of these needs, and you take that to the Lord.
Yeah.
And that's how I did it. I was like, this is the need. Now you go and pray and ask the Lord if at all. Sometimes I've not taken money because there was a connection to it that I wasn't, that didn't align with my mission statement. So that's okay.
Yeah.
But I'm bound to the Lord, and I promise God that I would never water down what we do for money.
Yeah.
And so I'm very clear. We serve the Lord. We teach Jesus. Now, that doesn't mean that I haven't helped people of a different faith.
Right.
We have had Muslims. We have had, Indian worshipers. We've had, we've even had, people in homosexuality
Right.
in our home. I'm not saying I don't love you and I can't help you. What I'm saying is this is what we teach and this is what we believe.
Yeah.
And while you're here, this is what we do.
And
Okay?
then you're like, God works through
And
that.
then if they, because faith is a journey and it's a walk. And, my goal is to love them.
Yeah.
But I do it in a way that honors God. And that can be offensive to some people, and that's okay. We're just not fit. That's what I tell them. It's okay. Maybe
Yeah.
there's someone else out there that will align with what, is good for you, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But we can't, I think as Christians, it's important to stand for what we believe. And this is why I believe it. And if you have a problem with it, then you have to take it up with him, because this is what he's called me to do.
Okay. So the second one in that is, so basically share your vision with like-minded individuals.
Yes.
Basically.
Yes.
So it says, and then once you share that vision, say, hey, can you help me meet the need?
Right.
Kind of thing. So really, in an aspect is it's more of marketing a little bit, in a sense of, hey, you got to get out there, you got to put in the work, you got to talk to the right people, share, and you got to be careful with who you share it with too, because
Right.
it can kind of go in the opposite direction, I'm sure.
Right.
But having like-minded individuals to come alongside you to help either serve or fund or whatever it may be.
Right.
It's at that point you really just need to surround yourself with the right individuals.
You have to get out there. You have to make yourself known. You have to let your vision be known. Because here's the thing, and I struggled with even doing that little part for a long time, because I felt like that was asking, but what someone explained to me was a lot of people want to help, they just don't know how.
Right.
And so you're giving them a vision of, hey, maybe you can contribute to this, not even just money, but resources and people that show up. And that's one thing I have found. You might think that person, oh, well, they don't really have the funds, but they might have a resource, or they may have someone, or they might have a skill that can help. So just, I went through a lot of networking events, and I started, going to different things to, just tell our story. And it really is a lot of work, as far as, putting yourself out there and starting to build relationship with the people that are donors, getting them involved. And one thing that I have learned, one of my board members told me one time, people aren't interested in giving to a house. They really don't want to give to a house. What they want to give to is to the person that's coming in the house that's having a life change. So when you tell the story, when you put it out there and you're wanting people to engage, you're going to tell about the person in the house. You're going to tell about the story. You're going to tell about the life change, because that's what people give to.
Yeah.
They give to life change. They give to something making a difference. Yeah. And, we do need funding. I mean, it takes a lot to run a house. It takes a lot to, and so, those are needs that private donors can give versus grants, or, grants are great, but they want to support, a project. And that's fine.
And so for our listeners out there right now, is there, and I'm going to ask you this, I was going to wait till the end, but I'll kind of retailer toward that. Is there a place, a website or something to where they can reach out to Hosea'S House that says, if they're hearing us talk now during the podcast, is like, hey, this is a place where you can go give. This is a place where you can go serve. This is a place to where if you have any kind of resources that could help us, this is where you go for that. What is that? Do you all have a link, a website? Or
We do. It's Hosea'shouse.com, and it's HOSEAS house.com. So, they can go on that. There's volunteers. There's different ways you can volunteer. All of those are listed on there. They can fill out a volunteer form. But also, the main thing, I think one of our greatest needs, and I would say that for most nonprofits serving the people and communities that we serve, are mentors. People that can walk alongside of someone else and just be a friend. Yeah. And one of my greatest volunteers that, I don't know what I would do without her over the last 6 months, because she is one of those people that will show up and go, what do you need? Do you need me to take this one today? She's doing dishes, she just shows up, and she sits down with coffee and meets them and takes them to lunch occasionally, goes to the park, and she's just being a friend.
Yeah.
And a lot of the women have little to no family. So for someone to invest their time is critical. So I would say, if it's not Hosea'S House, and there's a ministry that's dear to their heart, and they feel like, hey, maybe I should do something, call the ministry and say, what's your greatest need?
Yeah.
Where and that's what, when someone comes and says, oh, I want to volunteer, it's like, well, what are you passionate about? What do you like to do? Maybe you can utilize your gift. Maybe one lady came in and brought her homemade ice cream maker, and they had an ice cream party. Wow. The women had never experienced that.
Yeah.
And she was just using what she loved to do.
So basically what I'm hearing right now is really, you're not saying funding's not important. Of course,
Right.
funding's important.
Absolutely.
But it sounds like it's probably one of the major needs that a lot of people need right now. It's just people to show up,
Right.
people just to help, people just to be there for support or guidance, or help walk other, victims or whoever it may be, along with them, to say, you know what, I'm here for you. I've
Right.
got you. Is that a pretty major issue that you guys have? Is it hard to find volunteers and people to dive in? Do you think they may just be nervous because of the type of atmosphere it may be, or something like that? What's your thoughts there?
Absolutely. I always tell them, come and see, because our home, it's a beautiful home. It's an old Victorian home, and it is stunning. Like, God spared no expense
Right.
when he sent people to help us. Like, that home's nicer than my home, as far as everything it has. And when they come and they meet the women, they just fall in love with who they are, and, that in their families and their babies, and it breaks down all that that you hear about or see or you think in your mind, how the enemy plants those thoughts, or they won't need you. You don't have anything to offer. Oh, we had two little grandmas show up, and this one lady was estranged from her grandchild, and
Yeah.
she was heartbroken. But you know what she did? She would come and she would rock our babies. And she said, I don't know how I would have survived that year had I not came to Hosea'S house and loved on those babies, because it filled a hole in my heart.
Yeah.
So everybody can do something. And even if you're homebound, let's say someone's homebound, I'm like, you know what? If you send a card to a woman that never gets mail, never gets a birthday card, never gets a card in the mail,
Shows somebody
that's
cares.
huge. Huge.
Says, hey, I'm
We
thinking
can
about
all do
you.
something.
Yeah. And so even to the smallest things. So don't think that it has to be a monetary means type thing. It's and like Teresa was saying, it doesn't even have to be toward Hosea'S house. It
Right.
could be to any type of ministry that may align with that person's passion or vision or whatever it may be. But doing something even to the smallest extent is even better than doing nothing at all.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Even if it's, getting your friends together and, they knit some, just thinking outside the box. We put so much pressure on ourselves that we forget that even the small things mean so much.
Yeah.
And so that's just something that I'm very passionate about is don't sit by and let life pass you by without touching somebody with faith. If we have this great hope in us, we can do, pray and ask God, what can I do? This one lady for, I don't know, 2 years, she sent us $5 a month.
Yeah.
And it was cash, and she put her little, and I called her one time, and I said, I just want to thank you for your gift.
Yeah.
And she was blown away that I would call her for such a small gift. And I said, little is much when God is in it.
Yeah.
And that $5 went toward helping someone get a bus ticket. So don't ever think that just because it's small, it doesn't have fruit.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to agree with that a lot. I mean, even just a video,
Mm-hmm.
someone that something that I resonate with a little bit again too is think of the elderly too, right? Think of they may be in a nursing home or something like that, and now maybe they don't have any kids that come see them, their grandkids don't come see them, anything of that. Even sending a short video to somebody that says, hey, you know what, I'm thinking about you today, and I hope you have a wonderful day, or anything like that, just to say, hey, you know what, I appreciate you. People need that.
Right.
Yeah. And so I agree. The smallest thing can go a long way. It really can. So we talked about we were walking through these resource steps a little bit, and now we walked through the 501(c). All right. So definitely got to have that. The next step is surround yourself with like-minded people that kind of can share the same vision as you, or you may even be able to help walk them through that same vision. But someone that may have the same passion or whatever. Surround yourself with the right people,
Right.
To help out with your team. And then what do you think the third one is? As far, I know we talked about funding, and we talked a little bit about help and how people can help in those areas. What comes next?
Do it.
Just do it.
Do it. Because people are like, well, I don't have a house. Well, I didn't either for 5 years. But you know what I did? I called the Center for Women and Families, and I said, what do you need? How can I help you? Doing it. Just put your feet in the water and go do it. Like, even if it's small, whatever. If you're called to minister to women and you know that you're going to have hundreds of women that you're going to minister to the woman next door.
Yeah.
Start somewhere. Put it in action. Just stop talking about it and go do it. Just do it. Trust him. And
Yeah.
then if he closes the door, then go to another door, And that was my whole thing. I really, because a lot of people thought this ministry would fail. And without God, it would have, for sure. Because I didn't know anyone with money. Okay, so let's just put that there. I didn't know rich people. I came from a poor family, and I didn't know rich people. I didn't even know people that could really give big money, okay?
Yeah.
But God does, and He knows that. So I had to put my faith in Him. And so when I put everything on Him, it took that away from me. Like, oh my gosh, I don't really have to get, I just have to build relationships and tell the story and let God send, And so
Almost like you can breathe a little bit.
yeah,
It's like, hey, I don't have to worry about that stuff because God's got a handle.
right. But of course we do, and so it's just,
Yeah,
of
because
course we do.
it's human
We're
nature.
I'd be like, oh God, we're gonna go down. Do you not care that we perish? And but to see the goodness of the Lord, and just like I said, just do it.
Yeah.
Whatever God's been talking to you about, start somewhere.
Do you think it's really easy for people to have the vision and they get scared or nervous or fearful or whatever it may be, and then they expect other people to carry their vision for them, and then that's when it fails sometimes?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And not only that, but sometimes even well-minded Christians can give bad advice, okay, or can be dream stealers, I call them, because they don't see it and because they wouldn't do it. Or, like I said, some people came to me and were like, you did not count the cost. You're just doing this hidey-flighty, and it's not how God works. God is a God of order. And I'm like, absolutely, I totally agree. And that's why I have to line up with Him, because this is how He told me to do it. Now, He might not tell them to do it. He might tell them, hey, you go organize and you get all this, you get this much money first and then you go. But that's not how God told me. And so you have to be true to what God told you.
Yep.
And you can't listen to everyone. That's why I say you got to get your core circle, and you got to get your people that see the dream and the vision with you and are committed. And if they're not, you pray for God to exit them.
Yep.
Because I've had board members that I love dearly. They're still some of my best friends, but I have literally went to the Lord and said, God, move them out. Their vision and our vision does not line up anymore, and they need to go, but I need you to remove them. And He did. So sometimes people have to be removed from the circle because they're no longer seeing the vision.
And in walking into some of those things that He's called you to do, I think you got to be careful about who you tell. Even whenever you have the vision and the vision's going good, sometimes it's easy to have a person walk into that vision that you may either be helping or they may start to help you to build those things. And then when it comes down to it is they then start to pull your passion away from that vision a little bit. I remember having a conversation and, with our pastor, Pastor Barrett. But I remember having a conversation with him, and this is a good thing, not a bad thing. I promise you, don't kill me. And I told him a little bit about the vision of where me and Tara, this was like 8 months ago when we said, hey, we know we're supposed to be walking in marriage ministry a little bit. And he said, dude, keep that under wraps for a little bit, man, and be careful with who you share that with. Just because I think there's a whole lot of discouragement in it, and the wrong people can get surrounded in your life pretty quick if you allow it. And so that was probably some advice that I can really thank him for, because we did, and even when we started to walk into that, because we're kind of walking through that season right now, we had a little bit of discouragement. We kicked it off. It was really great. We had all these couples that were coming and showing up and doing everything. And then the attacks come in it too. And so it's in it, it's almost like you get discouraged a little bit. You're like, well, am I really even supposed to be doing this? We know we're called to do it, but are we even supposed to be helping or doing these things? And then the doubt comes with that. And so I think it's good to breathe a little, to take a break from it, because we did that this summer. But now, multiple conversations, even this conversation now with you and several other conversations with other people that I've had over the past week, actually, and it's just crazy how it works. Where it's like he almost gives you little pieces that says, "No, you're supposed to be doing this. Hey, a break's okay, but guess what? We're going to start again, and because I've called you to do this, and this is what you're supposed to be doing." And I think you can be called to to other things too. I think your main. I don't think that. I think it's easy to get lost in what you want to do and versus what God's calling you to do. I think it's really easy to do that.
The Lord has required me to hold the ministry very loosely. Because it's not mine. And one day I will transition out. That is the goal, is to one day transition out and hand it over and give new blood, new thoughts. But going back to that, people can see where Hosea'S house is today, and we're a ministry that's extremely blessed. We have never taken a credit card. We have never assumed a debt. We are a debt-free ministry. Everything we have, we've owned. And people can see that and go, oh, well, but they don't know what that cost me.
Yeah.
And, the road is very narrow for the people that are looking for a 2-year discipleship program. We're a 2-year discipleship program. You can come in and stay in our home for 2 years and then move into our graduate house for a year, because we know that change takes time. Breaking generational curses and behaviors for families can't be done in 3 to 6 months. It's over time. And so we're willing to invest that. But that road is very narrow. So we might have 1 or 2 families. And people go, you're just helping one person, 2 people? Okay. So you can become really discouraged, and over time and thinking, God, are we really making a difference? And then all 3 of them decide to act crazy at the same time. And I'm like, Lord, really? Like, and I have this one that I call the one that, graduated. I call her sometimes when I'm really discouraged, and I'm like, do we really make a difference? I mean, have we really had an impact? Because I'm in that moment of just discouragement, And she's like, Miss Teresa, you saved Hosea'S house saved my life. Of course you make a difference.
Yeah.
Don't give up. And so it's natural, that we will get discouraged, and the enemy wants us discouraged. But it's having those safe people to go, that's a lie, and you know it.
Yeah.
And I call her because she will call me out, like I've called her out over the years, and say, stop it, So things will happen, and it comes up, and there was a lot of ugly. There's still some ugly that we face. But it doesn't mean that God isn't faithful.
Oh, yeah.
And that he hasn't called me. Because I said, Lord, even if there's one person, if there's no people, Lord, I will maintain my faith in this walk, because I know that you're faithful even in the quiet period. Because sometimes I think God does that to let us rest.
Yeah. Well, and 2, I think when we get discouraged, we kind of lose our faith a little bit too. And we get in the way again.
Yeah.
Now, even though he's planted that vision in us, and he says, hey, this is what you're supposed to be doing. I've called you to do this, to live through you, to share the goodness of me, because it's all based on God, right?
Right.
And so I think when the first little mishap or something that happens when you're newly and you're still spiritually maturing with him, I think it's really easy to allow yourself to be like, this probably ain't what I'm supposed to be doing. Right. And then and if it is, he kind of refreshes that for you a little bit. Says, you know what? Yeah, it is. Like, you're getting in the way again. Just have a little faith. Trust me.
Comparison is also a thief of joy, And I can remember, early on, maybe in the first 7 years or something, another ministry, we started off about the same time. They were helping women, and they were just, it was exploding, and their funding was just outrageous. And I'm like, well, maybe I should do that. Like, maybe, and maybe I should help them. And the Lord spoke to my heart, and he was like, I have not called you to that. You stop, you be still. Just because one person is over here prospering in an area doesn't mean that you're not in the will of God.
Yeah.
Because I know that those years of lean seasons, And like you said, it pushed me into Christ. It pushed me on my knees. It made me humble and vulnerable for him because, maybe the Lord knows if I'm in a really good, secure place, I'm not going to be, as leaning in and pushing into him. And so, that's what comparison, you can't compare yourself or your vision or your ministry to someone else. You just stay faithful to what God called you to do.
Yeah. Well, and that's because I think that's where that good advice come in that Pastor Bear did give me was like, hey, you know what? Your vision's your vision. Right. And keep that sacred because the moment you start pulling more people into that vision, the more people are going to speak into that, and it may not be what God has for them. And so it's easy for them to be negative, or it's easy for them to be whatever that may be because it's not their vision.
Right.
He gave you that vision. He called you to do this. He didn't call 15 other people to do this. He didn't say, he might say, hey, I'm going to give you, several other people to walk alongside you, as time progresses. But in that given moment, when he's called you, that's the vision he gave you. Nobody else but
right.
you. And so you got to be, not saying that you got to put up a wall, but just be careful, too, about how you're sharing things and doing things and who you bring a part of that vision to.
Making sure you have good people that will speak truth in love. And I tell the ladies all the time, I'm like, I know that I'm hard on you all sometimes, and I will speak hard truth over you. I said, but I want you to know that when I started this ministry, I had certain women in my life that I had met through Bible study and women's ministry that critiqued me all the time.
Yeah.
Because they wanted me to be better. And I said, it's not easy to hear about yourself, especially when you feel like, oh, that's a flaw. But had they not told me, had they not scripted me a little bit on how to have conversation with because when you've never done that, and you've got to be teachable. You've got to be able to receive hard truth. And not everyone, well, what do you mean God called me? Well, yes, he did, but that doesn't mean that I can't grow and be a stronger person in it and learn some techniques that will help me move forward. And I'll tell you, there are some people that have wanted me to walk alongside of them, and I'm like, you're not teachable. I can tell you 10 things, and you won't do one of them. So why am I wasting my time when you're not teachable? You think you know everything.
Yeah. It's funny that you're talking about this right now because me and Brian, we just launched the first episode, and two things that we talked about, even in the business development industry, it doesn't matter if it's service industry, skilled labor, whatever it may be, we talked about two things that's very important is one, humility, and two, gratitude. Be grateful for what you currently have instead of looking toward other people's and wanting the same thing they have or, oh, it can always be more or it can always be this. But even whenever it comes to, like, teaching new technicians for and I'm going to use this for an example because that's the field that I'm in, as far as career. The automotive industry. Are you teachable? Can we show you how to do something? Am I teachable? Can I look in the mirror and say, can I humble myself when someone comes along? Yes, it's easy to be like, oh, well, I'm a business owner. I come from nothing. It's so easy to compare, right? It's so easy to use that for an example, but then when someone comes along that says, hey, you know what? I've been here, I've done this, I've been in it for a very long time. This may not seem right. Sometimes it's okay, to be like, hey, let me shut up for a minute and let me listen and humble myself. You don't know everything.
No.
And I think anybody that has the mindset of, I know anything and everything, boy, there's a lot to learn.
Right. And especially like in the nonprofit world, you better have a board that can call you out and can talk to you and tell you, because that's iron sharpening iron. And if you always just have people that, oh, yes, because I even had one of my board members, he was like, you scare me. Like, your faith is just, it scares me. It terrifies me because it's such a stretch for him. But for me, it's not. But so I had to learn how to walk him through my vision of why I believed what I believed and why I thought it would work, and meeting him where he was at, So, having people to go, no, you don't do that.
Yeah.
And to be able to respect them. And, we have an attorney on our board, And I'll just tell on myself because he told me not to do something about helping a person in the neighborhood because he was like, don't do that. That's not in your realm, okay? But, I just felt like it was the right thing to do because that's what God's people do.
Uh-oh.
After I received good counsel. And I did it, and it was a disaster. And I had to have him help me fix it.
Yeah.
And I just appreciate him so much because he's an older gentleman. And he never said, I told you so. He just said, let's fix it.
Yeah.
And I said, I have to repent. I have to say I'm sorry because you told me not to do this. And I did it anyway. And, so listening to godly counsel and not thinking that, just because it's good doesn't mean that I have to do it.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think it's easy I think at that point, if you find someone that's unteachable, that doesn't really have much humility, is it really for God anyway, or is it about themselves? Mm-hmm. And I think it's so easy to, we're human. We're easy to get an ego. We're easy to say, I've done something.
I knew what he needed. Okay, yeah. So rather than him saying, this is what I need, I know what you need. I know you need this, this, and this. And then another thing what God showed me now, I know we're probably going to get some little controversy on this, so I'm just going to say it. Because I struggle with it too. But God told me, I called you to women.
Yeah.
I didn't call you to minister to men.
Yeah.
Because you don't think like them. You don't talk like them.
Yep.
And I called you to minister to women.
Yeah.
And you stay in your lane.
Well, and I think there's places for that. I think it's not that that men are less important. I don't think that's what you're saying.
No.
I think that, hey, this isn't...
It's going to take another man. It's not going to take a woman. It took another man to go to him rather than a woman, is what I was saying in that.
Yeah.
That sometimes we try to, we think we know it and we're so much... But, yes, but... there can also be manipulation with that, too.
Absolutely.
And a man can spot that, maybe, especially in this situation. In this situation I'm talking about, that's what God told me, is that's where it was wrong.
Yeah.
You should have had a man go to him.
Yeah.
And help him, not you. And so I have, since that happened, I promised God I would stay in my lane. And so when, I had someone reach out to me, one of my very good volunteers, and wanted me to help with his father who came. And I said, you know what? I got some perfect men that I can connect you to that can better minister to your father.
Yeah.
And that worked out. It was a beautiful situation. One of my other, men that I know been through the same things that his father had been through and was ministering to him. So, again, I could have just wanted to appease that person and go, yes, I can, and I'm not the person for that job.
Yeah, and in that, I want people to understand that it's not saying that women or men are less or equal than one another or more than equal than one another. It's just that you know what you've been called to do. You know that wasn't the right situation, and so you had to bring in other people alongside you to help with that. And that's, we're not saying women's less than or incapable, and we're not saying men is incapable or less than. It's just that you know what lane you're supposed to be in, and
what the Lord told me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
and so, and I'm a big advocate for women in ministry.
Absolutely.
I've been on mission. I consider myself a missionary. God called me. He knew I was a woman. He knew I was married, all those things. But it's just, to really pray about that, about how, where. So another thing I tell people, if you have a vision, okay, so mine is toward women in these situations and families.
Right.
And so when you're a visionary or you're so far in God, you want to help everybody, okay? So that's me. If I see a need, I want to meet it, right? If I want to be in this ministry, I want to be in children's church, I want to be, because that doesn't work.
Right.
So like one lady that I have mentoring me, that I'm mentoring, she's working for me right now, and she's going to open a ministry. And I said, don't ever forget your mission statement.
Yeah.
And so hers is to work with women in post-abortion or contemplating abortion. I said, if it goes outside of that, it's not for you.
Yeah.
Stay within your vision. That's why God gave it to you. And when you start to, go out of the scope of that is when you'll start to veer off. So know what God called you to do and do that and do it well.
Yeah. And I think it's good, too, to even surround people around yourself for guardrails to help keep you within that lane, that vision lane. I think it goes back to that step number 2, surround yourself with the like-minded people and individuals that have a similar vision as you do. It's hard to find those people sometimes, and it takes a whole lot of work. But at the end of the day, I think it's very important to have those guardrails because it's easy to kind of get off in the ditch on some of that stuff. Yeah.
You mean well, and I mean, it is good, and I always say just because it needs to be done doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be you.
Right.
And, if you're doing 10 different things and you're not doing any of them really well, so pick one and ask the Lord to develop that and do it well, So I had a best friend, and I was like, oh, yeah, the disabilities ministry, they need me over here. And she was like, would you just stop? Like, just stay where you're at. Like, don't try to do everything.
Yeah.
Just because you're passionate about, or you really know that there's a need and you want to meet it, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be you, because then you'll be burnt out and you're not good for anyone.
Yeah, and I think when you're trying to find your purpose, because I was like this kind of when I was new in faith a little bit, was it's easy to pick things up and put them down, and pick things up and put them down until you're really trying to find where you're supposed to be at in life, or what God's really called you to do. Because you know that, hey, I'm a changed person. God's changed my life. I know there's more to my life, but what is that? And so I think really that's something that you really got to have that personal one-on-one relationship with God to really say, God, what's my purpose? What are you calling me to do in my life? Because there was one point in time, newly in faith, I gave my life to God, all of those types of things. I think my wife was the same way, and I'm not going to speak for her because that's something that maybe me and her can talk about on the podcast episode together. But I think it's real easy to that looks great. Let me try that. That looks great. Let me try that. And then next thing you know, you're walking into something, and you can hurt some individuals by doing that too.
I think that happens a lot, and even in church, I was talking to some of my ladies, and I said, look, you're in all this stuff, and you're busy over there, but you're not being fed because you're busy, and that's not serving you. You need to be fed right now. You need to stop everything, and get under preaching, get under Bible study, and get strong, and then figure out what you're supposed to do from there.
Well, what happens at that point is now you're serving from an empty cup, and you're serving from what you feel like is best for other people, not what God feels like is best for. It's always good to serve out of a full cup and then let the overflow splash on the other people. That's something that I've learned, within the past year. It took me a while, but that's where I'm at. And again, humility. It took me a long time to even be able to say what I just said. But at the same time, if you're serving, if you're leading a ministry, or you own a business, or you're a community leader, or anything like that, and we want to look at a religious standpoint, right, a Christianity standpoint, I think you need to be fed, right? You got to find a place for yourself also to be fed, right, and humble yourself enough to listen what's feeding to you, because if you're not self-feeding, or if you're not at a place to where you're diving into the Word or whatever it may be to get your cup full and have your one-on-one relationship with God, man, it's a mess then. It gets real messy. So what do you think about that?
Oh, I totally agree, because, and I can tell when I start to get lazy, when I start to not be as devoted to my journaling and my prayer journal and my, time alone with the Lord, I can start to feel that heaviness. I can start to feel, I always say, he says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And when it's heavy, I know that I'm carrying it.
Yeah.
Because if I'm leaning into him, I don't carry that weight. But when I start to feel the weight of the ministry and feel like it's all dependent on me, really, it's not. And but that's when I know that I need to press in and to repent. That's a big thing. We got to come to a place of repentance. And part of that repentance repentance is turning away from it,
Yeah.
and confessing it. And, you know, we need to make it real for people. I don't want people to see me as, or the ladies that I serve, that I'm perfect and that I don't fall. Of course we do.
Oh, we're all human.
Right?
Nobody's perfect, right?
And, that's the point where I think God's people need to be real. They got when we're vulnerable, we give other people permission to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
So if I tell you a story and then all of a sudden you're telling me a story you've never told anyone,
Yeah.
I've given you permission to do that.
Yeah.
And that's where, and especially for men, I think it's so hard to be vulnerable, to, just lay it out there,
Absolutely.
right? Because men have this, they don't want to appear weak and they don't want to. And so that's what, I've just been talking to my husband. I'm like, you know what? When you tell your story, you give other men permission to share their story.
Oh, yeah.
And to know that it's okay. We all are weak. We all fall.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that I think God showed me in telling my story, is that, I put on so many masks for years that I'm thinking, did I really help anyone? Did I really help any women? Like, given this persona that somehow my life was perfect and it wasn't. I feel like I would have done so much more had I shared my struggles, had I shared, even the ugly.
Right.
The days that I laid my head on my pillow and thought about it would be better if I weren't here, right?
Yeah.
And so I think some people are taken back by some of my honesty sometimes,
Right.
and my vulnerability. But I'm like, I know someone's here who's struggling with it.
Yeah.
And they need to know that there's hope. That we've all been there at some point in our life in some area.
Well, I think, unfortunately, with how the world is nowadays, is that perception's everything. And I think only people they put walls up so much, and they only want people to perceive them to be whatever they can present themselves as. So rather that be, wealthy or owning something or whatever it may be, I think when certain people see that person for that, then they want to compare and be like, oh, well, he's not similar to me, or
Right.
she's not similar to me, or we don't have anything in common. When all reality, we're human. We're all human, and we all have we all have a story. We all have something. We've been through something, or and maybe not. Maybe our life has been pretty good for the most part, but at the same time, I think even the people that may even have seems to be a pretty decent life or childhood or whatever, there's something there. Maybe they can even share from that and say, hey, you know what? There is hope out there, because there are good families out there. That I come from a decent family and did this, and there's hope. And people's stories are their stories, and I think when you're able to share your story with other people, gives you an opportunity to connect. It gives you something to where now people are vulnerable. People are able to relate to other people, and you're doing life together at that point. So, anything else you want to touch on that topic there? Or?
I would just say that, people are called to ministry when we've usually gone through our mess and God has redeemed us.
Yeah.
That seems to be, the majority of who God calls, because we can relate to the broken and, just being authentic. And then I would encourage that, especially, like for women, it's okay to tell what God has done for us. And that, I can remember one time I was in Dominican Republic, and I got offered to go to this. I was on a water purification mission, so it wasn't even related to women, but I got an invite to come to this women's ministry house because they knew I had a ministry. And so the women were real excited for me to come and share my story. But they spoke Spanish and didn't even speak my language. And so as I'm walking there, the Lord says to me, I want you to tell them your story, and I want you to tell them everything. And I'm like, oh, that's ugly, And I had a couple men with me from my team as well walking with us. And I was like, oh, Lord, I was sweating and I'm like, God, they don't even know I don't even know, they can't speak my language. And this one little girl was beside me, and I said, do you speak English? And she said, a little bit. And I said, oh, I said, well, if I tell my story, would you be able to tell it? And she said, yes, let's try it. And I'm sharing. And I'm just sweating thinking about this. But when I told those women my story, they were blown away that this, you know, American woman, that seems to have everything, oh my gosh, you struggle. Yeah. And so it opened up everything there by my vulnerability. And the men were like, wow, I didn't know you would share. And I was like, well, you know what? God told me to, but look what a beautiful story he wrote out of it.
Yeah. So I want to go back into starting the nonprofit organization.
Yep.
We walk through the steps. It's 5013C. Surround yourself with like-minded individuals. Not really look, but kind of share the vision for funding for people to come alongside you to serve, things like that, and then
Pray.
Just pray, and then
prayer before everything. But yeah,
and just do it. You
and
said
just fucking do it. Start somewhere, even if it's small. Don't I always tell people, don't you despise small beginnings.
Yeah.
It will bring forth fruit, and God will grow you in that. So start somewhere. Yeah. If anyone's interested in talking to me, and they can, Hosea'shouse.com. That's HOSEAS house.com. It's not Jose. Some people, they think we're Spanish because they think it's Jose's house, but it's Hosea. And so just, the sad thing is there have been at least 2 to 3 houses in the last year that have closed. And that is heartbreaking to me because 2 of them were for people in human trafficking.
Yeah.
And I thought, how devastating. Because it's so needed. But the funding is not there. People want you to, what do you mean you can't take this? What do you mean you can't start it? What do you mean you can't take them? And I'm like, are you helping anyone?
Yeah.
Are you supporting any of these houses that you feel like everyone needs to have open? Like, it's hard. It's hard. It's one of the hardest ministries. You're dealing with the devil on his playground right there.
Yeah.
And so, pray about what God would have you to do, how you could help someone in ministry, even if you think, oh, it's not my time yet. Then go help someone, strengthen someone else. Go and pray with the leaders of that ministry and cover them.
Well, and that's what I want to talk about too, real quick. I want to say that you may not be called to start something. You may not be called to be a business owner. You may not be called to, or feel in your heart or whatever, to start a new ministry. God may be calling you to help someone.
Absolutely.
If you're in a church, I know right now, in our church, the need for people to serve is through the roof right now. We have brand new kids area that just got renovated, and man, I'll let Barrett share that story if I can. Hey, you hear me, Barrett? We got to get on here. All right, this is me calling you out. You got to get on here and talk about how it was funded and everything, and God knows what's coming for that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of and I think He knows the people too. God knows what people He's going to put in that newly renovated kids area that we have, and then there's more things that are coming with the church as we renovate it. But at the end of the day, I think that God calls you to serve too, and maybe help ministry. So don't think that you gotta start something. He may be calling you, placing it on your heart. You know what? Hey, let me help out Hosea'S house. Let me help fund, help serve, help whatever that may be. It's no different than our church. Hey, let me help come alongside, serve in the kids ministry, serve in the tech world. Right now we're starving for, people to serve in the sound production and graphics and things like that as well. But I don't think that there's going to be people that He's going to be called to help serve, not just to start things either. So what your thoughts on that before we kind of close anything out and stuff? So
Absolutely. That's what I'm saying, because I just think about those women who started those ministries that have closed their doors. And, um, a lot of people showed up for the ribbon cutting,
Right.
even a lot of politicians and things. But when I heard they closed, I thought, where are they? You're fighting for human trafficking. Where were you before these people closed?
Yeah.
God's people got to stand up and show up. It's not just enough to talk about it. And, oh my goodness, yes, this. If you're passionate about abortion, what are you doing about it? Someone asked me that one day. Well, what are you doing about? It was about child abuse. And I said, well, I'm helping change mothers' lives so that children don't have to suffer that.
Yeah.
So do something. Whatever it is that you feel so passionate about that's not getting done, or the government's not taking care of this, or what are you doing?
Yeah.
Can you help one?
We're so easily to voice our opinions. We're so easily to say how things should be. But sometimes as opinionated people, we fail to look in the mirror and say, what am I doing to change it? If I'm so upset by this, if I'm so bothered by it, or if I love it, or, you can look at it two ways there. You can look at it as, if I'm so bothered by it, what can I do to change it? If I'm really loving it, what am I doing to help it? And so I think it's, as human nature, we have opinions. And then we fail to look in the mirror and say, what am I doing to help the opinion that I have toward this? And so I think it's something that we can improve as individuals, as human beings in general. But
yeah, and being adaptable, knowing that God changes our direction sometimes.
Yeah.
I can remember several years ago, probably 6 years ago, I got a call from the Center for Women, and they had a lady from another country, another religion, didn't speak English, and said, can you take her? And I'm like, yeah, well, I don't know how that's going to work out, because we teach Jesus is the only one that can heal. We don't, and but I went back and prayed about it, and I'm like, God, are we supposed to do this? Are we supposed to expand our vision? And yes, and so that woman has been with me for 5 years, is now a U.S. citizen, and has been working from the day that she started with us, working at General Electric now, and
Great.
just is renting a house there in Portland. And so had we not said, okay, maybe God wants us to do something a little bit different, or this doesn't really, taking that to the Lord, because it could be him leading in a different direction, or for
Right.
you to expand your territory. So don't pray for God to expand your territory and then don't expand your territory.
Yeah.
That doesn't work, okay? So we've done that, right? Oh,
Oh,
expand
yeah.
my territory. No, Lord, I'm not doing that. I'm not going there.
Or God, help me fund this, or whatever.
Yeah.
That's our prayer. But then he's like, what are you using the funding for? If I'm going to help fund, for what reason?
Right.
Be specific in your prayer.
And I love it, because I have had several people, even foundations, that we had applied for, and they made appointments to meet me and to come to the house. Yeah. And I've had donors say, I'm considering, but I want to know about you.
Yeah.
And the fact that they take their time and they do the investigating and they find out what's happening, and meeting the lives that are changed, that's huge. Start there.
Yeah.
If you're contemplating it, go find out what they're doing. Go find out if it aligns with your vision.
Yeah. So we're kind of running a little low on time, and that's okay. Before we close anything out, what is some advice that you can give for one, maybe someone that has already started their the mission of a 501(c), has started their nonprofit organization? What's some advice that the ones that are in it right now? So I want to hear that advice, and then the ones who are thinking about doing it that haven't started anything yet. What's some best advice that you can give to people that are like, hey, where do I go? What do I do? What's it look like in the next upcoming few months? Things like that. Kind of the best thing that you can give them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would say, with someone that has the 501c3 and is, trying to launch the mission, is to find out one, um, to stick with your mission statement. And then, like what I did when I first started, I didn't have a clue what a house looked like or what it entailed. So I made appointments with different houses, and I went and met with them and looked at the house, checked out their paperwork. I asked them, can I take this paperwork with me? And I mean, that's one thing I do for people that come and want to start. I'm like, you can have everything that I use. You can have everything except my logo, but you take it, make it yours, And so that's what I did. I got like 5 or 6 different houses. I pulled out all their information, and I said, I like this, I'm going to take that. And that's how I did it.
Yeah.
Because they were already doing it. Henry Blackaby, in a Bible study that I did years ago, I still quote this today: find out where God is working and join them.
Yeah.
So don't try to recreate something that someone else is doing really well. Just go join them. Start there. See if this is really, you can tread the water and say, okay, Lord, I'm not quite ready to do the house yet, but why don't I go to the house and volunteer and figure it out? You might find you want to do something else.
In it, you might have an extra set of hands out there too, Teresa.
Right?
Maybe.
I know. That would be great. And so you'll find your passion. And so I had one lady that I just adored her, and I just sat at her feet because I just wanted to, and I duplicated my ministry off a lot of what she did.
Right.
So I would suggest doing that. Find out where God is working and join them, and find out. Learn as much as you can.
Yeah.
And be teachable.
And then ones that have not started the 501c. I know you were kind of speaking to the ones that, hey, you're just now getting fresh, you're getting into it, you're getting started. Do you all provide any kind of resources or help with people that are interested in that want to start a 501c? Is that something that maybe you all say, hey, you know what, I'll help you out, come alongside to give you whatever advice? I know it can't consume all of your time because you have a mission that you kind of stand by, but is that something, or just advice to someone that's you know what, I've thought about it, I've been on the fence about it. What's something that you can give them for advice to help just push them off the fence and say, you know what, just do it?
Yeah. Well, you can always go to Google and pull up the information that you're going to need for a 501c3, which is, a good idea to make sure you have everything in order. There are people in our community.
I just realized I said that backwards too. I'm sorry. The 501c3. Yeah,
C3.
C3.
Yeah,
I've been
does
saying it
It's
wrong.
okay.
But go ahead.
But I wasn't going to correct you. But people know what you mean.
Yeah.
But, there are people out there, there are organizations. Like if you have a nonprofit that you're passionate about, go to the nonprofit and ask them, do you have, who did this for you? I did mine so long ago, and I really didn't even do it. Another person did it for me.
Yeah.
So, but we have a lady in our community through another ministry, and she'll do that. So, you can always reach out to me if you're in the Louisville area, but you may not be. But I would say go to your nonprofits around you and find out who did you utilize, and are they available?
Yeah.
So, like I said, it's a lot of paperwork, and some people can do it on their own, and they have. So.
Okay. Well, before we close this thing out, Teresa, is there something else that you want to throw out there, or anything to anybody that may be on your mind, or you feel like that you just need to put out there for the listening viewers, or anything like that?
Yeah. You know what? It doesn't matter what the economy says. It matters what God says.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you have the funds or you don't. It matters whether or not God called you to it. And just to do it. I mean, I can't even specify that enough, that, faith without works is dead. Yeah. It doesn't matter how strong you say your faith is, you've got to put it in action. And, starting somewhere, even if it's small and it seems irrelevant, that may be where God wants you to start, to humble you.
And put it out there one more time, too, for people to where they can find you to help with either funding or serving or mentoring or anything like that. I want to make sure people have that access to where they can access you guys.
Hosea'shouse.com, HOSEAS house.com. And or you can contact me, 502-418-3458.
Sounds great. I tell you what, It has been such a pleasure to have you on the show here with us. And
Thanks for having me.
yeah, hopefully maybe we can get something else scheduled again. So here soon, but it's been wonderful. Um, but anyway, guys, it is the end of season 1, episode 2 with Hosea'S House here with Teresa. And you are the founder, executive, kind of director of that. Okay. So if you all want to dive in, look, if you're struggling with domestic violence, if you have abuse in your life or anything like that, as far as women or children, please reach out to Hosea'S House and check these guys out. Teresa will help you walk through what the next steps is. Also, if you feel like you want to serve, whatever you heard today as we were talking on this podcast, reach out to them about serving, funding, mentoring, whatever that may be. Even the smallest gift or the smallest little gesture goes a long way. Thank you so much for being on the show. So glad to be here. By the way, just want to end out on this. We are going to be filming for season 1, episode 3 this upcoming week. We are also still looking for the business owners, the community leaders, nonprofit organizations now, like Teresa herself. If it's something that you feel like you might be interested in, comment down below or feel free to send us a private message or send us an email at blueclock.podtalk@outlook.com. That's blueclock.podtalk@outlook.com. And look forward to the next episode and hanging out with you guys. Again, share down in the comments below. Tell us what you think about these shows. Tell us what you would like to hear on these shows. And you can find us on Facebook or YouTube at Blueclock Podtalk. Just look up our channel, dive in. Be sure to subscribe to us and get that notification button, and you'll get notified when our next show airs. But as far as that goes, thank you all for hanging out with us. Teresa, thank you again.